Bibles tonight to Psalm 59. Psalm 59. Need the notes for tonight? Just hold your hand up. The men are ready to serve you with that. So find Psalm 59 and then find 1 Samuel 19. Psalm 59 and 1 Samuel 19. We're going to go back and forth in just a moment, but I want you to look at Psalm 59 there at the top, kind of the introduction that God gives us. And it talks about the chief musician, Ethron, mission of David, when Saul sent and they watched the house to kill him. So here God is telling us what the story, behind the story of the psalm is. So when they watched the house to kill him. So we'll read 59 in a minute, but let's go back and read the story back in 1 Samuel chapter 19. Then when we come back to Psalm 59, we can understand a little bit of what God's trying to teach us in that background. So 1 Samuel chapter 19, and let's begin in verse number 8. So everybody knows what we're doing. We're looking at the story behind the story and then get into the psalm as we preach through the book of Psalms. 1 Samuel 19, verse number 8. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled from him. And the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, and he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand, and David played with his hand. And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Saul also sent messengers unto David's house to watch him and to slay him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, If thou save not thy life tonight, tomorrow thou shalt be slain. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, and put a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster, and covered it with a cloth. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, He is sick. And Saul sent the messengers again to see David, saying, Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may slay him. And when the messengers were come in, behold, there was an image in the bed with a pillow of goat's hair for his bolster. And Saul said unto Michal, Why hast thou deceived me so, and sent away mine enemy, that he is escaped? And Michal answered Saul, He said unto me, Let me go, why should I kill thee? So David fled and escaped, and came to Samuel to Ramoth, and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and dwelt in Naioth. Psalm 59. So now we find the context. That's the story of what went on in Psalm 59 as he writes this. He says, Deliver me from mine enemies, O God. If you can see the picture of what he's talking about. From them that rise up against me. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity, and save me from bloody men. For, lo, they lie in wait for my soul. The mighty are gathered against me. Not for my transgression, nor for my sin, O Lord. They run and prepare themselves without my fault. Awake to help me, and behold. Thou therefore, O Lord, a God of hosts, the God of Israel, awake to visit all the heathen. Be not merciful to any wicked transgressors. Selah. They return at even. They make a noise like a dog, and go round about the city. Behold, they belch out with their mouth. Swords are in their lips. For who, say they, doth hear? But thou, O Lord, shalt laugh at them, and thou shalt have all the heathen in derision. Because of his strength will I wait upon thee, for God is my defense. The God of my mercy shall prevent me. God shall let me see my desire upon mine enemies. Slay them not, lest my people forget. Scatter them by thy power, and bring them down, O Lord, our shield. For the sin of their mouth and the words of their lips, let them even be taken in their pride, and for cursing and lying which they speak. Consume them in wrath, consume them that they may not be, and let them know that God ruleth in Jacob unto the ends of the earth. Selah. And at even let them return, and let them make a noise like a dog, and go round about the city. Let them wander up and down for meat, and grudge if they be not satisfied. But I will sing of thy power, yea, I will sing aloud of thy mercy in the morning, for thou hast been my defense and refuge in the day of my trouble. Unto thee, O my strength, will I sing, for God is my defense and the God of my mercy. Father, we need you tonight. Lord, I do not know who in this room, not definitively, Lord, I do not know who in this room who might be in such a condition that the dogs are surrounding. Lord, I know that if people are trying to serve you, there'll be times in our life where the dogs will surround, where people will be after us. Lord, I pray that tonight, for those who are not in such a situation, it'll be preparatory. They'll know to come back and look at this. For those that may be in the midst of it, that they might be helped and they might be strengthened and they not be devoured. So Lord, help us learn tonight about what happens when the dogs surround. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. Back in 1 Samuel, we see the story, and again, this is early in David's persecution by Saul. He's going to have a long time where he's going to be persecuted by Saul. But here's just the beginning. He's just now going out as a general. Saul's kind of upset with him, still jealous of him. But now we find Saul trying to kill him. And so when David escaped, he went to his house, and Saul said, I've had it. He said, I'm going to send some folks to watch, and when it's just the right time, I'm going to have him go up into his house and kill him. Well, Saul's daughter, David's wife, heard about it, and she says, well, it's going to be all over. You better get out. And so she let him down. And you saw the interesting story. We sometimes read about it in prisons. They do the same thing. They got some kind of figure, something to look like his head, and covered up with goat skin, put a cover over him. So when the men came in and says, where's David? She says, oh, he's sick. He's laying in bed. He can't come out. He can't come over. He's just trying to recover from this sickness. And so they went and told Saul. Saul, as you know, he did not say, oh, well, that's all right, we wait till he gets well. No, he says, bring his bed here. Bring him in his bed that I can kill him. And when they went, they found out it was just a figure. It was not David at all. And so then we find that then Saul said to his daughter, David's wife, and says, why did you do that? And she fibbed a little bit. She made the accusation that, well, David said if I didn't let him go, he was going to kill me, so I let him go. So she tried to cover herself a little bit. She's got a whole other sort of stories and issues anyway. But that's what would happen. So that's what it is. So David's on the run. So now we come back to Psalm 59, and he talks about the enemies being there, and enemies surrounding him. And we find twice or three times it mentions in that psalm, refer to them as dogs. As dogs. So tonight we're looking about when the dogs surround. So David here is writing this psalm. God's using that event in his life where Saul was trying to kill him, and he had men, mighty men, trying to watch the house, wandering around the house, probably going through the city looking for him when they found out he had escaped, and they were trying to kill him. So that's the context. So as we look about it tonight, I just want to challenge you. There's going to be times in your life, if you're trying to serve God, that the dogs will surround. There's going to be times when the dogs are just at you. There's going to be times where the dogs are just trying to devour you. It may be family. Sometimes it's a family that's after you. Sometimes it's a family that's trying to devour you. They're trying to stop your Christian walk, trying to stop you in what you're trying to do. And so the family may work on it. It may be co-workers. As you try to live for God and serve for God, they may come up with some things and feel like dogs of your co-workers are around you. Sometimes it may be, and it's unfortunately, church members that come around and get around you, and you feel like dogs surrounding you. They're attacking you. You know, again, David had done nothing. This was early on in the persecution. He was just trying to minister to Saul, and Saul was hating him, was jealous, and tried to kill him. So it's early on. So this is something David says, I really don't understand what's happening, but the dogs are around. So tonight we're looking about what to do when the dogs surround. What to do when you feel like they're just all around you. What you're going to do when you feel like you're going to be about to be devoured by the dogs. Has anybody ever felt that way? Boy, I tell you what, if you serve God, it will be that way. And sometimes it's cruel. Sometimes it's just aggravation. But we're going to learn about it tonight. And looking at this passage, just some simple thoughts about when the dogs surround. Because it will come. Because we do have an enemy. Very quickly, notice in this passage, we need to recognize the fierceness of the dogs. We need to recognize the fierceness of the dogs. When the dogs begin to come around us, as they did David, we have to recognize there is a ferocity about those animals. There's a ferocity about our enemy. I want you to understand, our enemy hates us. I said our enemy hates us. It may not be the person that's coming and attacking us because, after all, they're just doing somebody's bidding or whatnot. But our main enemy, Satan, hates us. And as he sends people out and our enemies against us, there is a ferociousness about it. Very quickly, notice the fierceness of the dogs. We just have to be aware and be conscious of the danger of these dogs that are about us. And why? Look at verse number 2. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity and save me from bloody men. So find, first of all, it says they are workers of iniquity, they are bloody men, they lie in wait. In other words, they are bad. If you want to just get simple to the story, it's just they are bad. These dogs, these enemies, they are bad. By the way, our enemy is bad. Satan is bad. There is no good thing in Satan. He'll come along to you in many ways and make you think he's going to help you out. He tries to make you think that if you follow me, it'll work better, and it's not going to be so bad, or you might be able to think that you can deceive him. No, he is bad. He is all bad, and he's out to destroy him. And so we need to realize these dogs that David's talking about, these people that were trying to kill him, they are bad. And just like a bad dog, how many dog people do we have in here? You love dogs. I love dogs. I love dogs. But if you get to, there's some dogs that are just bad. I mean, you don't have to do anything, but they're ready to bite you. You don't have to do anything, but they're just bad dogs. And that's just what it is. They're just wanting to get you. So it was. David had not done anything. But now we find the dogs are after him. And so we notice it was a bad dog. Very quickly, notice it was their work. They had the work of iniquity, it says there in verse number 3. Verse number 2. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity. It wasn't just their presence, but their personal life was wicked. Their personal life had sin in it. And so we understand many times we're attacked by people who have much more sin in their life. So we find their work of iniquity. We find their waiting for the soul. Waiting for the soul. Verse number 3. For lo, they lie in wait for my soul. So the dogs are there, the bad dogs are there, they're full of iniquity, but also they're waiting for his soul. So we picture the men that were surrounding the house or going through the city looking for him, hoping for David to come out so they can capture him. Let me help you with something else. Our enemy is waiting for us too. He's waiting for any time for you to slip up, any time for me to slip up. He's waiting for those opportunities. That's why we can't let down. We can't let down one moment. We can't let down 1 hour. We cannot coast. He's lying in wait for an opportunity to devour us. And that's what David says. Man, they're just lying in wait. He said, we don't know whether he looked out the window and saw them or he was escaped already out of the house and he was watching them. He said, boy, they are lying in wait. If I go that way, I see him. If I go that way, I see him. Sometimes we just have to understand that Satan is going to be out after us and he's always watching for opportunities to devour us. So don't let down. Don't quit. Never let Satan cause you to say, well, I can just rest and coast a little bit. No, because our enemy is out to devour us. So we find the dogs are bad. Number 2, we find they're bloody. They're bloody. Verse number 2, deliver me from the workers of iniquity and save me from bloody men. What basically God is saying there is only death will satisfy them. They're out for blood. We use that expression all the time. Somebody's out for blood. In other words, they're not out for an argument. They're not out for discussion. They're out for blood. They're out to hurt. They're out to draw blood. And so it is. Satan is out to devour us. He's out for our blood also. Only total destruction is the only thing the devil wants from us. So they are bloody. So we're looking at these dogs, the fierceness of the dogs, remembering that's our enemy. Our enemy. So watch out because they're bad, because they're bloody. Number 3, they bark. They bark. Verse number 6. They return at evening and make a noise like a dog and go round about the city. Behold, they belch out with their mouth. Swords are in their lips, for who, say they, doth hear. So we got verses 6 and 7 says they've got noises. They make bark. They bark. They sound fierce. So as a preacher, I don't fool around with dogs much. No, but we're talking about the dogs that surround us. Their words hurt us. They bark at us. They put out vehement words about us. They put out lies against us. And that's what he says. He said, they're making noise. They're trying to scare me with the noises. They're trying to scare me with their barks. They're trying to scare me with the sounds that they make. It's an amazing thing that we get scared at people's words. We get scared of what people say. So I think you got some of these in your notes. Psalm 27:12. Deliver me not over unto the will of mine enemies, for false witnesses are raised up against me. False witness means they're just liars. He said liars have raised up against me. They're saying things lying about me. Anybody here ever been lied about? Yeah, we have to understand it. So false witnesses, that's their bark. They are barking, they're making growling sounds. They are false witnesses against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. Maybe you've had some people that have surrounded you that just breathed out cruelty. All they said was things that were hurtful, all things that were just wicked, things that were just out to destroy you, and they are false witnesses. Psalm 109, verse 2. For the mouth of the wicked and the mouth of the deceitful are open against me. Oh, they're just open and they're making words against me. They have spoken against me with a lying tongue. They compassed me about also with words of hatred and fought against me without a cause. That's exactly what they do. They bark. Our enemy is bad. He's out for blood, but also they bark. Their words will try to destroy us. Proverbs 25:18. A man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul, a sword, and a sharp arrow. Boy, words can hurt. I know we always have that thing, sticks and stones may break my bones, so please don't throw sticks and stones. I don't think that's quite what it says, but we get the idea that words aren't supposed to hurt, but they do hurt. They do hurt. And so this enemy goes around, they are like dogs, they're making the sounds and barking. Here's the problem, especially for young Christians or immature folks. We're like little 2-year-olds. You see a little 2-year-old go up to a dog and he barks at him. Oh boy, and tears begin to come and they just, how many know what I'm talking about? The dog just, even if it's a friendly bark, and boy, that barks and it just scares them and tears run down their eyes, and boy, they just about have a nervous wreck. That's the way a lot of Christians are today. Somebody barks at them and they quit. Somebody barks at them and they can't go forward. Somebody barks at them and they think God is against them. Somebody barks at them and they think they're done for. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we just got to grow up. We just have to grow up. The enemy's going to bark at us. Those dogs are vile, they're wicked, they're bloodthirsty, and they want to bark. And so when they do, just don't flee, just run, just know what to do. Isaiah 51:7. Hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness, the people in whose heart is the law. In other words, these are the Christians. They know righteousness. They are people have the law in their heart. Fear not the reproach of men, neither be afraid of their revilings. If we're doing something for God, there's going to be some dogs that will come and revile. There's going to be some dogs that come along and reproach you. God says, don't be afraid. Again, hearken unto me, ye that know righteousness. In other words, you're trying to live for God. The people in whose heart is my law. We're trying to obey the Word of God, do the dictates of God, trying to please God. Fear not the reproach of men. People will reproach you for trying to obey God. It's an amazing thing. And they will also revile you, say all sorts of wicked things. Well, you're just too holy. You're just too much of a Christian. You think we're bad. And on they go. So let's grow up. Don't be babies. Just because they bark, you don't have to quit. Just because they bark, you don't have to have a heart attack. Just because they bark, you don't have to have a nervous breakdown. Just know that that's what dogs do. Dogs bark. I believe you've got the notes there from Charles Haddon Spurgeon. It says, I would rather, he said, be the butt of all sarcasm and the target of all malice and the victim of all falsehood than to be afraid to speak the truth. Because speaking the truth, you're liable to get falsehood, malice, sarcasm. But watch out, because recognize the fierceness. He says they bark, they growl, they belch out the sounds very quickly. Not only do they bark, beware their bites. They bite. Verse number 7 again. Behold, they belch out with their mouth. Swords are in their lips. In other words, their lips are like swords. They're very sharp. And they devour. They bite you. They're trying to devour us. I've only been bitten maybe once or twice in my life. I'm not crazy about it. But when dogs bite, they try to tear a piece of you away. That's what they try to do. And so Satan and his workers try to take bites out, try to take chunks out of you. Try to take chunks out of you. They'll try to take your sleep, try to take your rest, try to take your joy, try to take your peace, try to take your good relationships, just trying to bite and devour you. You say, preacher, you're trying to scare me. No, I'm trying to help us realize that there's going to be times in our life when the dogs are surrounding, and this is just what they do. They bark and they bite, and then we see very quickly they're banned. They're banned. Verse number 3. For lo, they wait for my soul. The mighty are gathered against me. Verse number 6. They return at evening, they make a noise like a dog and go round about the city. In other words, they travel in packs. Often our enemies, the dogs trying to travel in packs. There says, he said they've gathered. And says there tonight, he says they come in. They begin to search inside. Boy, don't be surprised when the attacks begin to come that you feel like the whole world's against you. Don't be surprised when you say, I've not got not just one dog that's after me. It seems like they're just everywhere. They just travel in packs. And so it often is. Satan will come around with his crowd, and you feel like you're under attack all the way around. So just be careful. So recognize the fierceness of the dogs. When Satan comes, when you're trying to do right, and the devil raises up people that hate you, as Satan raised up Saul to try to hurt David and sent his people out. David looked, he said, boy, they're just a bunch of dogs. They're surrounding me and they're barking and trying to bite me. It's dangerous. They're traveling as a whole pack. There's a bunch of them out there. Boy, he felt like he was just under attack, and so he was. So you and I just have to be on guard for that. Now, of course, deacons never experience that. Isn't that right, Brother Roy? Yeah, never. No, nobody ever complains about the deacons. Pastors never do it, never get it. No. Husbands never get it. Wives don't get it. No, anybody who's trying to live for God will suffer persecution. So just recognize the fierceness of the dogs. And that's what David said. Just trying to serve his king. He loved his king, but now the dogs are after him. So what do? Number one, recognize the fierceness of the dogs. Just recognize that's what they are. Number two, rest in faith in God. Rest your faith in God. You recognize the fierceness, but don't put your faith in yourself. Put it in God. The whole tone changes in this psalm. Verse number 8. Verse number 7 says, behold, they belch out with their mouths. Swords are in their lips. For who, say they, doth hear? But thou, O Lord, shall laugh at them. Thou shalt have all the heathen in derision. Boy, there's a change in tone as he leaves off focusing on the enemy and begins focusing on God. When he stops focusing on the dogs and starts focusing on God, everything seems to change. Again, this is early in David's fleeing for his life from Saul. So he's probably just missed maybe in the first time where he says, well, I've got to recognize I've got some enemies out there, but I've got a God that's greater than my enemies. And so we've got a whole change of tone. Some of the same words we're going to see here in the psalm that he uses in the first part and the second part, but in the second part it's got a different tone, it's got a different approach. And so we have a whole change as he leaves off focusing on the dogs and turns his heart and his mind to the Lord. By the way, that's what we need. We need to focus on God. Keep your focus on God. That's why you got to be in church all the time. That's why you need to be faithful in your prayer closet with God every day. And for all of us, we've got to be focused on God. Because if not, we'll be focusing on the dogs that are trying to get us. We'll be focusing on the enemy that's trying to get us and think, well, there's just no hope. Because he apparently had a great fear. He says, boy, those dogs are after me. And their teeth are have swords. It's terrible. So he had a fear going. But now he said, wait a minute. I'm going to go from fear to faith, from fearing of the dogs to faith in my God. So what does that mean? Very quickly, here's how you rest your faith in God. Remember His superiority. Remember His, that is God's superiority. Again, up through verse number 7, he's talking about the dogs, how bloodthirsty they are and how hungry they are and how they gather together in a pack and all those things. But all of a sudden in verse 8 he says, but thou, O Lord, shalt laugh at them. Thou shalt have all the heathen in derision. It'd be like a 450-pound fullback from the Giants and a little chihuahua coming and barking at him. Go away, little dog. Aren't you glad God's superior? I mean, he says, he just laughs. He said, all these dogs, here they come, and boy, they're barking, and boy, they're trying to bite, and they're bloodthirsty. He said, but God just laughs at them because He is so superior, because He is so much mightier. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we say, well, but all the dogs are after me. I'm just afraid. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Just remember who we serve, God's superiority. Psalm 2, verse number 2, the kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against His anointed, saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. It's not even close. It's not even close who's got the most power. It's not even close who's got the most superiority. It's not even close. Now, when we look at the enemy, they might be bigger than us. They might be stronger than us, but they're not bigger and stronger than our God. I hope you believe that tonight. So when the dogs come and you be surrounded, you rest in your faith in God. Remember His superiority. Number 2, rely on His strength. Rely on His strength. In other words, I set my dependence on Him. This is so important. Look at verse number 9. Because of His strength will I wait upon Thee. Because of His strength. So I'm going to rely on His strength, and I set my dependence upon Him. Look what it says. Because of His strength will I wait upon Thee. Trying to understand the English behind that, I believe it could mean 2 things. I think it means, in particular, this first one. Because of His strength, I think He's talking about those dogs' strength, His enemy's strength. Because of His strength, I will wait upon Thee. In other words, His strength is bigger than mine. His strength, because of His strength, He's big. That's a big dog. Those are big dogs. They're about to devour me. So I'm not going to depend on my strength. I'm going to wait upon God. It could be, but the verbiage is not quite right for that. But I know a lot of folks that think because of His strength, meaning God's strength, will I wait on Thee. But you've got to change in context there between His and Thee. But either way, the whole idea says because of His strength, because God's strength is stronger than the enemy's strength, it says I'm going to wait on Him. I'm just going to wait. I'm going to set my dependence on God and wait on God. Say, preacher, what do you do when the dogs are surrounding you and your family members or your co-workers or people in the church are mad at you and they're surrounded you and you've not done anything and they're about to devour you? Just rest your faith in God, rely on His strength, and wait on Him. Set your dependence on God. Psalm 37:3, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Psalm 33:20, it's in your notes. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. So I wait on Him. When I set my dependence on God, I have to wait on Him. I'm waiting on God to direct. I'm waiting on God to fight my battles. I'm waiting on God to do His work. But not only am I waiting on Him, but listen carefully, I follow Him. When I set my dependence on Him and I rely on His strength, not only am I going to wait on Him, I'm going to follow Him. Look at verse number 10. Because of His strength, verse number 9, because of His strength will I wait on Thee, for God is my defense. The God of my mercy shall prevent me. God shall let me see my desire upon my enemies. The word prevent, normally we think about that means to stop. But the word prevent means to go ahead there in the Hebrew, to go in front of. He's going to prevent me. He's going in front of me. He's going to allow me. He's going to open up the doors. So I need to let Him lead me. His mercy will prevent me. His mercy will go forward before me. His mercy will go in front of me. By the way, I'm glad God is a God of mercy, and His mercy will go before me. So not only am I going to wait for Him, I'm going to follow Him. I do not want it. When the enemy is coming at me and those dogs are coming at me and God is in front of me and He's going to be my defense, I don't want to get between Him and the dogs. I'll let God go forward. I don't want. But here as Christians, so many times we get in front of God and we find ourselves in a mess. And so I will follow. He will prevent me. He will lead me. So let's don't get ahead of Him in justice and vengeance and battle are in the way. So rely on His strength. We're going to rest in His faith by relying on His strength. Number 2, by seeking His defense. By seeking His defense. But when those dogs come, we just have to seek His defense. Verse number 1. Deliver me from mine enemies, O my God. Defend me from them that rise up against me. I'm looking for defense. Verse number 9. Because of His strength will I wait upon Thee, for God is my defense. Verse 17. Unto Thee, O my strength, will I sing, for God is my defense and the God of my mercies. It's His defense. In other words, He's going to defend me. He goes to bat for me. He goes to battle for me. Boy, He is my defense. So I'm going to seek my defense. I'm going to set Him up. So I set my dependence upon Him and I seek His defense. God, You defend me. You go to battle for me. You go to bat for me. Psalm 62:6. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. Oh, I like that. He is my defense. Look at your notes, Psalm 62:6. Is it in there? He is my defense. I shall not be moved. Oh, I don't have to be on the run. I don't have to be, because He's my defense. I do not have to falter. I do not have to run. Psalm 89:18. For the Lord is our defense, and the Holy One of Israel is our King. Oh, we must hurry. So, the dogs are at us. What do? I rest my faith in God. I rely on His strength. I set my dependence upon Him. I seek His defense, and I sit secure in His deliverance. I sit secure in His deliverance. Man, I'm just going to sit secure in the fact that God will and can deliver me. Verse number 1 again, deliver me from mine enemies. Verse number 2, deliver me from the workers of iniquity. Verses 11 through 15, we'll see it talks about that over and over, about being delivered. In other words, when we think of deliverance, we think about bringing away from or separating us from the enemy. He delivers me by either pulling me out or pushing them away. But here's a verse I struggled with until I think I understand what God is saying. Verse number 11. So he's talking about the God of mercy, verse 10, will prevent me, go before me. God shall let me see my desire upon my enemies. In other words, God goes in front of me and He's going to do what He needs to do against my enemies. Then we have an interesting phrase, slay them not, lest my people forget. Scatter them by thy power. Bring them down, O Lord, my shield. But He said, slay them not, but scatter them. Slay them not, but bring them down. Slay them not, verse 13, but consume them in wrath. And that consumption is not so much they're completely gone and devoured, but their power has been consumed, their anger has been consumed, their wrath has been consumed, that they may be not. Let them know that God ruleth in Jacob. I began thinking about that, figured out. He said, why not slay them? But God says, why not to slay them? He said, lest your people forget. I began to think, He said, don't slay them, lest my people forget. I think so. I saw two things. Number one, He said, don't slay them, but let them be a witness. He says, still consume them, still pull them down, still send them out, if you will. Scatter them. Let their sin of their mouth overtake them, and all those sort of things. He said, but do not slay them, do not completely destroy them as a witness. In other words, as those enemies were around, and all of a sudden the people would watch, and they say, whoa, there's some enemies out there, but you know what? God's got control. They're not winning after all. They're not getting the last word after all. They're not consuming it all. We're still here, and the enemy is out there, and God's doing it. So it's a reminder. How many understand that when everything's going right, we forget what God does for us? He said, don't slay them. Don't get rid of them completely, so that we can remember what God is doing. That God's power and man's weakness. It's a witness to that. So He said, don't slay them lest we forget. So it's as a witness, but also I believe it's a whetstone. A whetstone. A whetstone is you know what that stone is. That's the stone you sharpen knives on or axes on. Sometimes we need the enemy around us to keep us sharp. I don't know where it came from, but there's an old quote from the Spartans. I think that's who it was. They had a city that they're always going to war with, just a little city next door. And there was a rule they were not going to completely destroy that city. And the little phrase they used afterwards says, destroy not the whetstone of our young men. That little city, that little enemy says, don't destroy what keeps our men sharp. Don't destroy what's keeping our men on guard. Don't destroy what's keeping them right. And so I believe what we say is, slay them not, lest they forget. At first, as a witness, as we see the enemy being defeated constantly, the enemy being held down and put back, he said, we'll remember God. But also as a whetstone. Sometimes we need the enemy to keep us right. Because if not, we'll forget. You're looking at me, calves in the new gate. Let me just give you some examples. Sometimes we need poverty, or we forget what God has done for us. Deuteronomy 8, 11, 14, it's in your notes. Beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God in not keeping His commandments and His judgments and His statutes when I command thee this day, lest when thou hast eaten and art full, and hast built goodly houses, and dwelt therein. And when thy herds and thy flocks multiply, and the silver and thy gold is multiplied, and all that thou hast is multiplied. He said, wow, what a time that is. Wonderful. And all thou hast is multiplied. Then thy heart be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Sometimes God has to take things away so we know how good He's been to us. Hosea 13:6, according to their pasture, so were they filled. They were filled, and their heart was exalted. Therefore they have forgotten me. Sometimes we need a little poverty to remind us of our prosperity. He said, don't slay them lest we forget your power. Lest we forget that you're the one that's keeping us safe. There's our enemies. He said, don't, you wipe them out, we'll forget about that. Can a maid forget her ornaments, or a bride her attire? Yet my people hath forgotten me days without number. We think of peace. Sometimes we need a little battle to remember what God has provided us peace. Just for the sake of, in Judges 2:18. And when the Lord raised them up judges, then the Lord was with the judge, and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For it repented the Lord because of their groanings, by reason of them that oppressed them and vexed them. I mean, the people got in trouble, they got in sin, they called out, God raised up a judge. Boy, they were so excited, and they delivered them, they had freedom. And it said, it came to pass when the judge was dead that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them and to bow down unto them. They ceased not from their doings, from their stubborn way. God gave them peace. But when they got used to peace, they fell into sin again. They needed that judgment to bring them back. With that simple thought, look at verse 15. I love this. We're almost done. Verse 15, let them wander up and down for meat, and grudge if they be not satisfied. He said that earlier, but he said that up in here. Where is it up in there? Let them wander up and down for meat. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was looking too far up. Verse number 14. So at evening, when he's talking about them trying to consume him, when they were in, when he was kind of afraid of them. At evening, let them return. No, I'm sorry. And they return at evening, they make a noise like a dog and go round about the city. They belch out their mouth, their lips. So they're going around the city. They come into the city. They're looking for food. And now, he said, that's when he was afraid of them. That's when he was fearful of them. He said, that's when they're getting ready to attack. Now he says, let them come. Let them come in verse 14. And at evening, let them come. He said, I was afraid before when they came in and they were belching out their evils and they were looking around the city trying to devour things. He said, I was afraid. He said, but now when I've got it focused on God, he says, let them come. Let them come because my God's going to win. Let them come because I've got confidence in God. Let them come. Isn't it amazing how sometimes you can see one thing and be so scared of it, and then when you get in the right perspective and knowing what God's on the throne, you can say, go ahead and let them come. Let them come. Sometimes we just have to let them come. Oh, what a difference has been made and changed in the attitude very quickly. So rest in your faith in God. Realize the ferocity of the enemy. And last thing, we'll go quickly, raise his fame. Raise his fame. Once you begin to rest in your faith in him, raise his fame. Verse 16. But I will sing of thy power. Yea, I like that. Let them wander up, down for meat, and grudge if they be not satisfied. Let that happen. Let them come. Let them come. But I, so even though when they come, but I will sing of thy power. Yea, I will sing aloud of thy mercy in the morning, for thou hast been my defense and refuge in the day of my trouble. Unto thee, O my strength, will I sing, for God is my defense and the God of my mercy. So we got to raise his fame. Boy, when once you get right with God and the dogs are out there, just glorify him. Raise him. First of all, of his power. Of his power. That's what he talks about. I will sing of thy power. Telling others, bragging on God, praising God, singing about his power, of his passion, talking about his mercy. Oh, his mercy for us. Man, just just magnify and raise His fame for what a merciful God we are, of His protection. That's our defense. He protects us defends us, and His provision, that's our refuge. He's given us a place to run to in the day of trouble. Aren't we have a wonderful God? So when the dogs come, don't be surprised. David looked out, he said, Saul's trying to kill me. He sent those men. Whether he saw him out the window, whether he slipped away and saw him looking in the streets when they came back at night looking for David. He said, oh, the dogs are there. I'm afraid. But they said, but wait a minute. God sees that and He just laughs at him. Wow. So let's be careful tonight and recognize when the dogs come and God's dogs got you surrounded. Rest your faith in Him. Recognize they're dangerous. But rest your faith in Him and then raise His praise. Raise His fame. Because we're on the winning side. Let's bow our heads, please.